And again, these first couple weeks, I'm going to apologize right away in case the audio, just how much this can actually pick up. But after that, I'll actually have I'll be wearing, what is it, Whitney Houston style mic. So you'll be able to have good audio. And if that's bad audio, I'll just go over slides and it'll just be a screencast of slides. So first question, what are the dangers associated with a hacker or unauthorized person accessing the following sensitive source of information? So when we think about medical records, why do you think it's a bad thing for hackers to get access to those? What could they do with those records?
I can give the live example.
Go ahead.
So one of the hospital that I work for, so they're the hack right? So and then they demanded it was a ransomware definitely. So they demanded a certain amount of. They were literally couldn't they were blind, they could not know. They didn't have the access to the records of the patients. That way they can okay, this patient gets this medication or what's going on. Literally, my wife she had been there for long, so she knew it, right? That's one example how critical it is. And then they always hack the critical things the gas well in the United States. That's happened last year, 2021.
Yep.
So
last year was a bad year for the U.S.
There was a surge in the price that time, so there is definitely a high risk.
Yep. So with ransomware, it's crazy how well these ransomware attacks are kind of organized. They're like legitimate businesses. They have tech support. They have you have an account manager. Just like you're buying a house. You have a realtor to kind of help you through this process. That's literally how these ransomware attacks are. So what's going to happen is IT is going to show up one day, and there's going to be a message that says, "Hey, we have access to all of your stuff. We've basically taken it and we've locked it behind a lock and key, and it's going to be X amount of dollars based on the volume of information that they have. It's X amount of dollars if you want that key." So traditionally, 5 years ago, it was always, you don't negotiate with terrorists, and you were able to kind of break into some of those algorithms, some of the weaker algorithms. But now, I was on a panel. I spoke in Chicago about 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the guys was the CSO for an electric company, and they literally had to pay the money to get back into their system. He went and got Bitcoin and had to meet at a cafe, and then they had a what's that called when you have somebody in the middle, like a mediator, or it's what. There was a liaison where they gave him the money, and then they gave him the key, and that person just went like this, and he literally had to go figure out how to spend or get $40,000 in Bitcoin, and literally take it to this cafe, and to get access to the power again, to the actual infrastructure. And he was talking about throughout it, they were super nice, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we can get you over to an account manager to get this taken care of." I would be so angry at that point. Are you kidding me right now? So these aren't just Russian or whatever foreign entities script kiddies that are no, they're literally it's a company, it's a business, it's the mob, if you will, that are taking control and then trying to get that money. Traditionally, you do. Once you get that key, they will unlock. It's not they're just going to take the money and run, because if you think about it, let's say they just got the money and then they ran off. Well, the next time someone got hacked, they're not going to pay that money, right? Because they heard from their buddy, they paid and they didn't get it unlocked. So they do unlock that content a lot of times. So to mediate something like that, it's key to back up your infrastructure. Back up your files offsite. And what people often screw up with backups is they never take time to restore from backup in a sandbox just to see if you have good backups, okay? So that's one of the biggest ways that you can fight ransomware. Because if I got that phone call, because I run a consulting business as well. So if I got that call today saying, "Hey, we have access to all your stuff," I'd be like, "Cool, see ya." Hang up, delete that, restore from backup, make sure everything is good to go, and move on. I'm not paying ransomware you know, I can't say that I won't forever because obviously this is ever changing. But I would not, at this point, like I'm not really susceptible to that with my clients. So one side of medical records is ransomware, but what's another side of medical records? Think about the type of information that's on medical records. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, if somebody steals my, let's say my grandma's prescriptions, or something like, somebody can steal the prescriptions to sell it over, or maybe target you to sell you some type of prescription.
Right.
If I have your information.
And they're going to see all your information, so that way when they start a a phishing campaign or a even over phishing, smishing, vishing, they're all the same thing where they're trying to trick you into doing something. It's just the media in which they do it on. They're going to try to what's called social engineer their way in to get access to you because you're just another link. Okay, so once I get you, I might be able to get a little bit more information, and then I can get a little bit of information from you, and I can put that together. So again, medical records, there's a whole drug thing. You could sell prescriptions and make money. There is medical records, like you said, to be able to social engineer. And then there's the infrastructure itself where those medical records lie that they can get money that way. We'll jump to the end. Personal identification data like social security numbers or credit card numbers. Why is that bad for hackers to have? Yeah.
Identity theft, steal someone's identity, charge up on their cards or whatever.
Right. And when we actually start going through the different levels of, like, you'll hear things like advanced persistent threats or APTs or governments, like they're using this information so that way they can take on that persona in order to get information, secrets, get the person to think that they're them in order to get the information that they need. So a lot of information like we see here, online information on social media, financial records, employment records. The weakest part of any system is the human, okay? We are the weakest system or weakest part of any type of system at all. When we look at some of the biggest hacks that have happened, it is because of a human had they screwed up somewhere, whether they gave information out, whether they got drunk at a bar and they had, my 11th graders can copy access cards, like without issue. Like that's one of the units that we do. So imagine what, a higher level of hackers can do, okay? And the thing is, this stuff isn't hard anymore. Like it's really, really easy to do a lot of the cyber stuff. It's not, the biggest hacks that we see are by no means the most sophisticated as far as code is concerned. It is 100% that human element. So good discussion to get us started. Anybody have any questions on that? This is me just getting some time to get the slides up. No preguntas?
As far as like on the module.
Yeah.
For when it says your answer.
Yep. Yeah, if you want to put it in there, like as a way, like during the week, like I'll post that discussion question and you can answer it. And then when we get in here and actually have the discussion, like you could just pull yours up. I'm trying to treat it like an actual course, like my course at school, that I would have my students like go in there and type. Like that would be their what's called a bell ringer activity. Like before 10 minutes into the class, they have to go in there and like find a link or a current event in there. All right, so this is the first thing. So cybersecurity, a world of experts and criminals. So this is where we're going to get a lot of our lingo that we're going to then use from this point forward. Things like the white hat versus black hat. What is social engineering? How do we what is cybercrime? As we kind of break this down. And again, these are all things that are going to help you get a good foundational knowledge of that security plus content. And if you do want to pull up the slides, feel free. Like you could take notes on the slides, or if you want them printed off beforehand, just let me know what you guys need. Like I have no problem doing the prep work to get like notes printed out or guided notes, things like that. You just have to let me know. Cool. So when I look at a target, so in my classroom, like it's fun for my students to go through and do the entire penetration testing cycle. Because I teach offensive security, okay? So I'm teaching more along the lines of Certified Ethical Hacker as well as Pen Test Plus, okay? I think for a high schooler to do Security Plus is a disservice to them, and it's also could be super boring, okay? So when I'm looking at, or having them look at kind of what targets they're looking for, a lot of times we start off with websites and trying to find out what information does that target have, okay? We are a data-driven society, right? We have things that are tracking us all the time, whether that be voices like, you know, Google or Amazon, Cortana, which I don't think anybody uses, but like they're always kind of listening, and we've all seen that before, where we go to Amazon and all of a sudden now it's recommending, you know, a book that I was looking at or something that I clicked on another website. So that data, that information about us as an avatar is out there. So if I'm looking to target somebody, I'm going to start trying to figure out, okay, so where do they hang out? Okay, where are they going to? What type of websites are they going to? Because I want to try to come up with this persona that I can then start targeting. I can say, hey, in the military, okay, maybe you posted something on social media that says, hey, go into Fort Gordon for a little while. Well, then I'm going to instantly become a digital CSM, and I'm going to say, hey, I need this information from you ASAP. And us as, you know, privates through E4 will be like, oh shit, like CSM, like I need to send him this information right now. I don't even know why he's emailing. How did we even get my email? Okay, that whole attack is somebody that's just trying to get access to either your CAC, they're trying to become you, and they're really capitalizing on that fear. And that's because they just looked on Facebook. You know, there's a lot of people that post, and I was a very social person. I traveled about 200 days a year with Panasonic, and like the first like 2 months, I was like, oh, I'm in all these different states, and I'm, you know, having all this fun, doing all this cool stuff. And then my wife's like, hey, can you stop? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I've always been a very public person. She's a very private person. She's like, you're telling people that I'm home alone and vulnerable, you know, and that's really uncomfortable for me. And I was like, we live in rural Ohio. And then it wasn't until somebody like that she didn't even know was that there's like a gas station in our town. We don't even have a stoplight, but we have a gas station. And they're like, oh, I saw your husband's out of town. And she's like, who the fuck are you? Like, so she told me that, and I instantly just stopped. Like, I didn't post anything. And that's been actually really hard for, like, my family to adjust to, is, like, my sister, like, posted, oh, I'm so proud of my brother. You know, he's leaving for this whole long time, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, like, I get what you're trying to do here. Like, I love you. I appreciate it, but can you please take that down? Like, that's really, I don't need, you know, people to know that my wife and son are home alone for the next, you know, 20 weeks. And, you know, who knows what they could do. Not that my wife can't handle herself, but still, like, this didn't have to be posted. So that is the power of data. And that's why we're seeing all of these cybersecurity jobs on the rise. And back when I first started ethical hacking, or like getting into the space, like it was basically like, hey, there's a wall here. How do I get through it? Like, and there was like one book that you could get at the bookstore that had anything to do with anything with cybersecurity even. And I mean, I was probably like 12 or 13. And like I wanted to hack into Wi-Fi networks. So which I did, I was successful. But now you go to a Barnes and Noble and you see this whole section of just all these different hacking books. In my classroom, I have probably like that whole section right there that is just full of books from the top, all about just cybersecurity, not even as much networking and like PC stuff. It's mostly like different like hacking manuals and stuff like that. This area, this domain has grown where like next summer I'm doing a middle school, higher elementary and middle school cybersecurity class where they're going to be doing hands-on hacking at the middle school level. Because at the end of the day, like I want them to be aware of these type of attacks that are out there, just so that they're more prepared. So when we look at, again, with cybersecurity and why these jobs are so abundant, it's because there's so much data, and so much data is created every day that needs to be protected, okay? So when you are looking at specific to the cybersecurity or the Security Plus exam, always have that in the back of your head, you know, that data is what institutions are trying to protect. That is PII, which is personal identifiable information. That's medical records. That's educational records. Those are all things that if they got out, if they had that data leak, number one, the organization is responsible for it, and there's going to be some type of punitive action that takes place, whether they have to spend a bunch of money on getting the information back or getting people some type of like LifeLock type of security, whatever that is, something is going to happen. Okay, so when you're looking at the questions, you want to make sure that your job as a cyber analyst is to find different ways to protect that information. Another thing that's a little bit newer is this idea of GPS. So there's this kind of this rat race that goes on between the hackers and the good guys and bad guys. One term you're going to hear a lot in cybersecurity is red team versus blue team. So red is on the attack, blue is on the defense. You might hear purple, which is someone that kind of stands in the middle and they do a little bit of both. But the more defined is red being on the attack and blue on the defense. To me, like setting up firewalls and like reading log files, super boring. When I studied for my CYSA, which is the blue team certification, it was super boring. But I did the pen test. Man, I loved every minute of the pen test because it was like I could hack something new like every chapter. It was fun. But it takes everybody in order to do that. So one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is this geospatial or GIS information. Our phones are tracking us. Our watches are tracking us. So we need to make sure that we are holding on to that data as well, because when we get into the multi-factor authentication section, one of the things to authenticate you to a system that you can use is that GPS, like where you're at is one of those things. So if we just have, there's an app that has a bug that it allows me to see the user's, physical location, I could then fool a system into saying, hey, I'm here in New York City, when in reality, I'm in California. So we want to make sure that, we're staying ahead of new technologies that are coming out. And me, like when I look at stuff, I'm always looking at, it sounds bad, but like, what are the vulnerabilities in that system? Whether that's like, I specialize in physical entry, so lockpicking, door entry tools, copying badges, default like elevator keys, like hacking elevators. That's kind of what I focus a lot on. But there's so many different ways that we can do it through programs with phishing in order to get that information. So it's our job to kind of keep that locked down. So there's 3 different types of hackers, if you will. And this is one of those things that you're going to have to know for Security Plus, but it is really easy. So a white hat is someone that is hired in order to find issues with, trying to find issues in a system. So me, for the consulting that I would do, the Army would hire me in order to do a penetration test on this building itself. Okay. So I would sit here, I would start to get an idea for what time people show up, what time people leave, number of people, what they're wearing, what they look like. And then from there, I would start seeing what deliveries show up. I would start to get an idea. I'd do a walk around the building. I might be a pest control guy, and I would walk around the building just to get more information on different vendors. So I would try to see, what type of, does the company or does this institution use X vendor in order to, maintain their laundry? Like, you remember at Basic, they had the truck that pulled up and did the laundry, right? So that would be a key piece of information that I would use. Hey, I'm just following up. I'm from this company. We actually have to do a bed count, so that way we can make sure that we're servicing you properly. Do you mind if I just do a quick walkthrough of the bays in order to see, like, we need to have an actual physical count, because we've had an issue with the number of things that you guys say that you have. We just want to get a good idea of your linen, so that way we're not charging you for another company's, linens. Like, we're trying to save you guys money. So do you mind if I go ahead and walk through? Oh yeah, sure, go ahead. Like, don't think anything of it. That would be, what I would be hired to do, is little, like, physically break into stuff. Someone else, another white hat, might do a similar attack, but on a piece of software. And there's different types of software testing, similar colors, where it's white, gray, or black box testing. And again, you are going in and you're literally hired to break into the application, or it could be the network. You're hired to break into, test vulnerabilities with these cards. It still shocks me how many things that you're able to get in with that. And and with the right, like, I can't believe the people that have access to Active Directory and the rank that they are, that these attacks could happen, that we don't see more attacks on our infrastructure. But I would study things like that. Like if I'm attacking Active Directory, I would try to find out like who's in charge of it. I might call and say, hey, I'm this vendor, and do, you know, a similar attack, you know, and that is someone that's white hat. Okay. So an example of a gray hat hacker. Hey, they have Boingo Wireless here. I want to see if I can, you know, I'm not going to use it. I just want to see if I can get around their authentication. You know, I wonder if there's ways that you can get free internet while you're here. Okay. Now here's the difference. Black hat is I am trying to do something unethical. I'm trying to get free internet. Gray hat is there's a gate there and I want to jump over it. And that's how I was like early on. I didn't really want free Wi-Fi. Like I remember driving around when I worked for Geek Squad. Me and two other guys literally drove around with an antenna and just broke into networks just to see if we could do it. Like we had zero intent. We didn't do anything once we got on the networks. We drove away. It was just that thrill of the hunt. And that's what a gray hat hacker does. They just want to see if they can get access to something. And then black hat, that's your criminal. That's your one that like they're not stopping at the thrill of the hunt. They're actually getting on that network. They might install some type of monitoring software. They might try to get access to cameras. They might try to do other bad things. It's their, you know, their intent is that of a bad nature. Does that make sense? Good there? Awesome. So when it comes to these types of criminals, and all of these, I guess, would fall under different levels. So you can be a white hat and you can be a script kiddie. You can be a white hat and you can be a hacktivist, kind of. You can be gray hat and be like we have the example here of a vulnerability broker. But it's not like you don't have just all the elite hackers in the world aren't all black hat hackers. Like you have some really, really good white hat hackers that are kind of combating that. So I just want you to understand that these are two different things. Okay, you have your type of style or your intent of hacking, and then you have their level of hacking or their expertise. So the first one is script kiddies. That's where I would say where a lot of people start off. You know, you're just learning about it. You're literally reading a tutorial and then you're typing the commands in. You're not really developing your own tools yet. You are just simply using existing stuff, and then when it gets to the point where it breaks, you have no idea what to do to fix it. Okay, you're not that sophisticated yet. Script kiddies still cause a lot of issues. They still mess up a lot of stuff. There's a lot of vulnerabilities, especially when it comes to like small businesses, that script kiddies are able to really do a lot of damage to those businesses, especially if someone's not focused on the cybersecurity side. You also see this a lot in schools and universities because they, you know, again, it's kind of their hobby to try to break into these things. I've taken on students that had criminal records just to kind of hopefully get them over to the good side. My thought process is if I can show them that they can make a lot more money getting paid to break into a bank instead of just breaking into that bank and then going to jail for the rest of their life, that's success for me. So I'll take these script kiddies on that have gotten in trouble for circumventing filters and stuff at their schools in order to kind of show them the way to white hat. Vulnerability brokers are, and this is more of a security plus like definition of it. But this is going to be your bug bounty. So they say it's gray hat. I think bug bountying is white hat because like they're putting that challenge out there. But for the exam, make sure you are reading the questions because it'll say Johnny found issues with this piece of software and then reached out to the company and asked for, you know, X amount of dollars. Would that be white hat or would that be gray hat or would that be black hat? Okay, some would say black hat, right? Because he hacked into this software and then asked for money. I guess it depends on how he asked for money, right? Because if he's just like, hey, I found this bug, do you guys have a bug bounty program? That's a little bit more white hat or gray hat. If he reaches out and he says, hey, I found this and I'm going to leak it tomorrow unless you pay me, That's where that kind of that black hat is, right? Is that intent? He doesn't care about the company at that point. He doesn't care about the Google, the Tesla, whatever it is. He's doing it for his own personal benefit. He or she is doing it for their own personal benefit. The last one is a hacktivist. So this is going to be where sites are defaced. We saw this a lot right when the Russia-Ukrainian conflict war started. You saw on both sides where public websites would get defaced. Think about like PETA, for example, and when they would break into different like processing plants and they were advocating for against animal cruelty. It's the same thing, but now on the hacking side. So we've seen like especially like political. Oh, yep.
My question right here, like, so recently, I'm just trying to add this with the recent incident, like, it's a political anyway, though. So the Russians, since they invaded the Ukraine, so there were a group of people, not from, typically from the Ukraine, but all around anywhere from the world, right? They actually, like, try to hack the systems, the government system, the Russian side, right?
Oh yeah.
So those are also kind of, we can put it in the hacktivists because they organized, right?
Yeah, so again, it depends. So it depends who organized the group, number one. So if it was something that was like led by Zelensky, that's going to be a little bit different. If it was a independent like Reddit group,
But that was
then
like an independent group.
yep, that would fall under that hacktivist.
Like the, let's say, individuals from the different parts of the world, so even serve the Ukrainian forces from their own personal side, right?
Yep.
So even like, I'm not saying like the state level, it could be a different category. So like, if like United States continuously or the North Korea targeting U.S. or U.S. targeting Iran or some other parts of the world, so that's the state level anyway. But like for this one, I think kind of similar to the activists. That's what my personal belief is.
Yes. So it's all about who is actually organizing it, and what their kind of end goal is. Because there's a fine line between hacktivism and taking a website down and then crashing a train. Okay. Because they did get access to the Russian train system and they had full control over that for a minute. So if they're like wrecking that, like that's now cyber warfare. Like you're putting like humans in danger. If you're taking down or you're creating a fake website, about Putin, like that's going to be totally different. Like you're slowing it down or you're taking down news media that is maybe spreading, false truths. Like that's going to be hacktivism. If you're putting people in danger, that's where it becomes black hat.
Intent is trying to use the nuke weapons, right? Like they shut down the nuclear facilities, so that could be the hacktivists too, right? Just to slow down the mass casualties from those kind of events.
100%. So this is a really cool map. So this is on Kaspersky, which is hilariously interesting because that's a Russian company. So these are all of the attacks that are going on right now. So right now we can see that the United Kingdom is the most attacked country right now. This often changes. So like in the midst of the actual war itself, like when it first got kicked off, you just saw nonstop. You would see this attack, and it would all of a sudden it would light up. Actually, just north of me, a lot of the traffic was coming from like just north of me, like right inside of Canada, and you would just see all of these attacks that were going on towards Russia as well as Ukraine. But just the amount of data that is like the amount of attacks that are going on, and these come from different IDSs, which is a way of detecting a threat. IPSs, which are things that prevent attacks, viruses. So these are all the different places that it comes from. So that's where they're getting the information. And it's just crazy to pull up this map and just see the amount of attacks that are happening just on a second-by-second basis. I mean, it's all... I mean, look at how fast these numbers are just constantly going up. And this is only one company that's doing this. This is Kaspersky's pulling a lot of this data. And it's just where they kind of have either their feed in with their software, or they are, reporting out to a third party. So any questions on those three, script kiddies versus vulnerability brokers or bug hunters and hacktivists? Do a search for Kaspersky, Kaspersky threat map, and I'll post it in the Discord as well as the classroom. So next we have our cyber criminals. So cyber criminals, these are going to be the kind of like your mob, if you will. These are the ones like I was talking about that have the help desk that'll help you. They'll have the account manager. I mean, it's ran organized crime basically is what this references to, and they'll steal money out of your bank account. I mean, they'll sell credit card numbers. You might see this also into like I believe what it was, like Silk Road, where they were selling drugs on the internet. This is where the organized crime kind of comes from, is cyber criminals. The next one here is the state-sponsored hackers, and this is what I was saying, where if Zelensky, is doing this, then that becomes state-sponsored at that point. Same thing like across the street. I mean, we have state-sponsored hackers literally across the street, as they're going through their the cyber MOS, like they're going over. They tend to focus on, when I was looking at it, more of the defense, but it's still like they are state-sponsored security experts.
Our defense contractor got hacked back in 2020. They got they didn't even know a year long. So before they found out the 10 terabytes of data was
Leaked out.
So it's like they organize. They are funded by the government level, so they have more access to the resources, finance, and then they were able to. And Lockheed Martin,
Oh, yeah.
that was also hacked. So especially who provides the VPN server, or there are so many defense contractors working for the defense project for the government. So they're always targeting those. Let's say the Chinese, they do have pretty much everything that we do have, just slightly modified version of us.
Oh, yeah.
So our weapons especially. So how is it possible they do have the access to everything else that we do have here to some extent? So yeah, then recently the Outlook. So that was
Yeah, so last year was just horrible for the U.S. government when it comes to attacks that happen. If you want a good read, look up the SolarWinds attack. SolarWinds was the tool that they used from SolarWinds was a update tool that allowed the U.S. government to update different servers. And what happened was the password was still set on one of the servers. It was still set to a default password of SolarWinds123. Okay, so then if you have this server that pushes out updates to these hundreds of servers, what can you also push out to those machines? You can push out a virus, some type of vulnerability. So then, and it just was like, oh, cool, an update's coming through. I'll go ahead and take that. And it was one of the worst. It was the worst that the U.S. Government had seen. And then the pipeline one was also a really, really bad. I want to say that was more on the social engineering side. But yeah, look up SolarWinds and just see just how easy that hack could have been stopped. And we're still trying to figure out what they had access to or still have access to, because rumor is that that was about a year long APT, which is an advanced persistent threat. APTs are, when we look at different attacks and stuff. I was actually talking to the FBI last year when I was at the National Cybersecurity Conference, and they have a whole team that is dedicated to getting information from the big power companies, universities, any large corporations, because what they're doing is they're identifying, hey, this looks like this type of attack. This came from this APT or this advanced persistent threat or this organization, and then they're going to share that information like, hey, this is what they did in order to stop that from happening. This is what you need to do, and there's this share that's actually going on. In the state of Ohio, I'm a member of the OC3 committee. So we have the National Guard, cyber. We have the education sector or the public sector, and then we also have the private sector. So you have And we have some pretty big companies in Ohio. We have the Cleveland Clinic, we have your Progressive Insurance, we have Nationwide Insurance. Like there's a lot of pretty big, the limited brands, so all your like Victoria's Secret, all that. There's a lot of pretty big companies, and their security teams can actually be activated just like National Guard gets activated. So you get a call and say, hey, we have this attack on this infrastructure. We need you right now. And they literally leave their job and they go and they help with that attack. So again, this is a collaboration that came together where we have, because in Ohio, we don't really have a strong cyber command at all as far as National Guard. There's very few positions in that. So we really had to lean on the public and private sector in order to protect ourselves. And I've been on that committee for about 2 years. I do the education and development side. But they've reacted to, I want to say, 3 incidents in the last year. And it could be of any of those 3 organizations that need help. So if there's a public entity, the private and military help, and vice versa. Also, every field office for the FBI will also handle a lot of that, like any of the hacking and stuff like that. They'll be the ones that do get involved. So a couple things. CVE. This is something that you're going to see a lot in the, especially on the penetration testing, is the common vulnerabilities and exposures. So each and every virus starts off with a small vulnerability, and then they build around that. Okay. So once I get into the building, if we're comparing it to like physical, once I get into the building, I then can start, basically infecting my virus. I can find out more information about what they're doing. I can leave something behind. For example, we have open network ports that are all throughout here. I can plug in something called a shark jack, and I can map this entire network within 30 to 45 seconds just by walking in here. One attack that I've actually done before is showing up to a business with a tray of Subway. I called and I said, hey, I'm dropping this. This was sent from one of your vendors. I'm dropping it off. I showed off. They let me go. Hey, do you mind if I put these in the break room? I'll take them. No, I have to take a picture and everything. Oh, go ahead. And I literally plugged into where their copy machine was and mapped the entire network and then left. So then I could see what everything was on there and turn that in as kind of some evidence. It's the same thing with a CVE for a computer or a system, or even opening and closing, water. We had an issue about a year ago with a water treatment facility where a guy had gotten access to this, and he used just a common vulnerability that was in this microcontroller, and all of those are those are all publicly put out there, and they're we'll get into the ranks of how easy they are to do, but those are all posted out there. He just used one of those. He had a vendetta against this company, and he mixed, I want to say, more chlorine into the water and basically made it toxic, and that went out to the community. So again, these CVEs are the first place that you want to look when it comes to your systems, and you can actually pay and subscribe to getting updates on these things when it comes to threat intelligence, and you tend to see that at the larger companies. But as far as the Security Plus, you're going to need to know what a CVE is. So I definitely suggest that you jump onto that website and go through some of those and try to find some for games that you play. Like if you play Minecraft, look up log4j.s. That was one of the more recent vulnerabilities. You'll be able to find that on the CVE database. And then from there, you can search for that. And there's already full vulnerability scripts that you can run that and attack against the servers, any servers that you're testing as far as red teaming. There's also early warning systems out there. So I can actually show you one that I have at a client site right now. That I have a honeypot on this network because we saw some weird stuff. We saw some weird stuff happening with this client. Just some weird attacks that were coming through, or people. It was a school, and when the users were active, there's no way a lot of these teachers were active. Here we go. So this is what an early warning system would look like. So from here, this machine is telling me, hey, there's this inbound SSH connection, which you may or may not have gotten to in your Cisco stuff right now. But basically, it's a terminal connection that is going here, and it's coming from this port right here. So this is telling me like there's people that are actively trying to attack this system because I can see, we can see they're trying SMB, they're trying SSH, they're trying RDP. These are all protocols to get control of a system. So SMB stands for small message block. There's a ton of attacks around that. RDP is the remote desktop protocol, which is where I can actually see the computer, and SSH is where I can kind of terminal in. So what a honeypot is a device that just sits, like this device just sits on the network, and it's basically like putting a car out in the middle of a parking lot, all the windows down, doors open, and like $500 cash on the dash. Like I'm literally sitting on the network, all the ports are open, I have all these vulnerabilities listed on it, because what I want to do is I want to study these attackers, see what they're doing, see what they're targeting, seeing what tools they're running, so that way I can then block it on all of my other systems. That's why it's called a honeypot, because it's just so sweet that they get sucked into that, and then I'm starting to see and be able to study kind of what they're doing. So that's going to be what your early warning system is, as well as knowing what a honeypot is. You'll have to know what that is. So a honeypot, just think about like I said, the car, doors wide open, or a house wide open, full of cash, full of free food, short of not having having a sign out that says free. Someone walking by like, oh, some cash on the dash, I'm gonna go grab that. And now I'm gonna watch like how they move into the house, which way did they come from? It's the same thing. I'm watching what tools they're running and kind of what IP addresses they're coming, then I'm just gonna do a hard block on those addresses, yeah.
So a honeypot could be classified as like a reconnaissance tool?
Yeah. Yep. So it falls under early warning or recon against your enemy, in that like I'm not going to use a honeypot like if I'm attacking someone. I'm not necessarily going to try to use a honeypot. So it wouldn't be reconnaissance in that way, but it would be reconnaissance as a blue team member. It would be reconnaissance against my enemy because I want to see what they're doing and seeing how they're attacking my network. Yes.
So you do honey map after they already got into the system, right?
Yeah, well, after they got into this system. So again, this is the one that's in what's called the DMZ, or the demilitarized zone, is where you'll normally put that. And the DMZ is separate from your production workflow, and it's going to be something that they can just do a port scan and find it. My goal is for them to find this system that I have fake user accounts in it. It looks like an Active Directory server, so they're going in there, they're like, oh, I got access to everything. And I'm just watching them like, you ain't got shit. Like, you're totally off my network. Like, no names are even the same. No files are the same. And, like, I ham it. Like, I create HR department folders and stuff in order for them to, like, I need them to spend a lot of time in there. I'll put a web server up there because I'm trying to discover as many of their tools as possible. Because if I have more intel on how they work, then I can block all those tools from running.
So basically, you create a lot of fake network for them to try to hack in and then see the way how to do it.
Yep. And I need them to spend all their time there. And then as they're actually doing stuff, we're over here, or I'm reporting to a SOC saying, hey, we need to make these changes. This is the tools. Hey, we're not actually updated. We need to make sure we push this update through. I'm live communicating with them. Yeah.
So you're not just looking at here's the IPs that are trying to access our network and blocking. You're actually looking at here's new exploits we haven't seen that they're using, and then we try to implement that on our actual network.
Correct. Yep. So and this is getting ahead of it, but I think it's a good time to talk about it. So antiviruses work in two different ways. Number one is a signature, okay? So a file looks like this. We've seen it reported on this other system. We're going to block it. So if it downloads, we know this is bad. We're just going to block it from happening just because we have a signature, which means we know what this looks like. It could be the size of the file. It could be how the bits are lined up, whatever that is. That's a signature, okay? And that's how antiviruses worked for years, because back in the day, like, all the viruses looked the same. Like, this virus looks the same on every machine. They've gotten more sophisticated, and now what we're seeing is the code actually changes per client, okay? So now what we use is what's called heuristics. So somebody or a program that opens up and then tries to make a SSH connection back home, that's looking pretty sketchy, and heuristics is like profiling, okay? So think about it like a bouncer at a club. Okay, they're walking up, and as they're walking up, that bouncer's already looking at them. They're starting to profile. Is this going to be an issue? Is this not going to be an issue? You come up, you reach into your pocket, like they're going to be like on edge a little bit, right? It's that same thing. Heuristics are doing that same thing. We're profiling what users are doing or software is doing, and then it's going to turn it off. Honestly, Windows Defender has gotten really, really good at heuristics. Okay, for a long time there, I was using Kaspersky as my antivirus. I stopped using it because Defender is just so good. And even attacks, like when I set up labs at school, like I have to break Defender in order to get the kids to be able to do it, because the kids will literally download a file, and like they'll go to their desktop and it's already gone. Like Windows is just that on it right now. So Defender's, it's pretty solid.
So you can only do this when the hacker, they just start doing that, right, in the early stage,
What's that?
right? Like, kind of like
For the early warning system?
for the early warning
Yeah.
system. So if you let
Once
them-
they're gonna figure it out at some point, like it's gonna click with them, like this is way too easy.
I see. But if you wait for so long and they already get into the network, it's too late for them.
Correct. Yeah.
I
Yep.
see. That's why you gotta understand about all the network, how it's working, how the IP address, and
Yep.
be able to see it,
Mhm.
to identify what's going on with that.
Absolutely.
That's why people say like you gotta get good at network first before you learn on the techniques.
Yeah, I mean, having basic knowledge of networking will help with cybersecurity or with Security Plus, but I don't think it's required because like this stuff is all like memorization and regurgitation, and like just having a basic understanding of kind of how security works. Once you get into like CYSA and having to look at log files and different like from different like domains and stuff like that, then you'll have to know a little bit more for sure.
Get into the technical stuff.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. There are laws that are constantly being updated. One of the newest ones was funding for cybersecurity education for hiring more cybersecurity specialists. We haven't had unemployment in cybersecurity since I want to say 2004. It's been zero unemployment. So there's still a ton of jobs. The problem is we just don't have people that are qualified. So what we see in the cybersecurity world is people want to, unfortunately, like it's becoming a necessity that you have to have it. So not all businesses can pay what a cyber professional is worth. So you'll see job postings out there that are like, you have to have 10 years of experience in cybersecurity, and we're only going to pay you $75,000. And it's like, nah, bro, like that just ain't working. And then so you have people that are new to cybersecurity, and they're like, this certification is $3,000 that you're asking for, and this is an entry level position. Like, so there's a lot of that going on right now. So there's actually laws that are being pushed through to kind of help normalize that and just offer more free education for people, so that way they can kind of upskill into that. State of Ohio, I have a blank check to whatever certification that I want. They did a upskill bill about 2 years ago, and then this year they opened it up where there's no cap. So my last one that I submitted before I left was about $12,000 in just certification vouchers and some prep material. And that's just any employer in the state of Ohio is able to apply for that money. So definitely look at your state. Don't depend on just the military. Your state might actually have a program that's similar, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to develop basically a funnel of highly skilled people to bring in the Amazons of the world, Microsoft, like these high-paying companies. Because if Microsoft's looking at an area and they look at the jobs numbers and they're like, nobody's qualified to do any IT stuff, they're not going to set up shop there, right? So look onto your state economic development council and see if they offer any kind of way to help you out. As far as like what laws you're going to have to know, just know that there are federal laws out there that are, that do protect individuals and companies from, data breach. You have the Federal Exchange Data Breach Notification Act, Data Accountability and Trust Act, as well as the very bare minimum Cybersecurity Act. And these are all things that protect you, the consumer. Like if your credit card company gets hacked, like they have an obligation to tell you about that and offer you some type of protection, so that way you're not a victim of that, because they don't want to keep that going. Like they don't want those numbers and that information to keep going and being passed around the dark web. They need to notify you that, so that way you can get that turned off, if you will. Okay, so we are coming up to the next hour. So I think now looks like some people are starting to get sleepy. So we're like halfway through. We're on like slide 20 out of about 40. So we're gonna pick up this 1.3 next Sunday. And if you have any questions, I definitely urge you to check out the videos that I posted. They'll help some of this stuff make sense, and also come with questions. Like if you're looking over the slides and you're like, hey, I want you to spend more time or less time on this, your feedback is huge. Okay, just let me know how I can serve you guys. Any questions before we break? Yes.
I always have one question regarding the cybersecurity. Like, let's say if somebody gets hired as a cyber professional, like cyber analyst or
Yep.
officer or whatever. So that's itself is a vital force anyway. So if for some reason that person, so let's say the data get hacked or the company got hacked. So is there a high chance that that person going to be responsible for, like, because he's in that position? So
You'll never be personable. I mean, unless you went out of your way to like leave the front door open, like you're not going to be personally held responsible for that. Is that your question?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. So it's not necessarily like the company is the one. You have to have cyber insurance. So that's what we're seeing a lot with schools right now. Is for us to get cybersecurity insurance, we have to do like this laundry list of things in order to like enable multi-factor authentication is a big one, having antivirus on every machine. So we can either spend $12,000 on the cybersecurity insurance or $2,000. So like 3 or 4 of my clients are like on me right now, like, hey, we need this whole list of things done like right away. So like I have my team like going through and like we've created kind of our own auditing system in order to make sure. But the insurance company, like we're pushing that risk off onto insurance, and they're going to pay for it.
I mean, there is always that's my personal bit, like the hackers, the black hackers. They're always like one step ahead of the white, because the white hackers thinks that okay, where they think that is okay, completely okay, actually this thing's okay, and they goes there to break because they not only know how that is the security policies or the standards has been mentioned by the bigger enterprise level or the company level, so they know not only that, to know the loopholes how to
Get around.
get into it. So
Right.
they're always one step ahead, no matter how many, let's say, vulnerability assessment tools that they use, humans. I mean, there is always a room for the loopholes anyway. Though. That's why I was like kind of like how they get held responsible for, let's say, not securing their system or the network. So
And like I said, a lot of that's pushed off in insurance because you can't. I mean, especially we're going to talk about a thing called a 0-day vulnerability. 0-day means they had no heads up that this was like anything. I mean, so the 0 days are. Those are the ones that are like the biggest issue, and they like have to immediately respond to that. So like your 0 days, you're not really going to catch a lot of flack for because you didn't even know it was a vulnerability. Especially if you're showing like you have these bug bounties out there. Like if you're Google, you have these bug bounties, you have testers. Like you're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity. The issue that comes in is when you have like Target, for example. When Target got hit for all those credit cards. They didn't do their due diligence to, secure, and they had their credit card machines that were on a similar network to and they actually went in through the air conditioning vendor to get access to that network. So that was a blatant, you didn't do your best to separate those networks. Like this is Cybersecurity 101. Like you have PCM, like you have laws that govern, like nothing else can be on that network, and you still did it. So at that point, yeah, you're liable. Like you're gonna have to do something to make that right.
yeah, I mean, to some extent, like it's I see like there will be a situations where, like, let's say to
Mhm.
the vendor or there would be a group like they said, hey, even though there might be you as a personal security, as a cybersecurity analyst or the officer or whatever, so you know it there is a fault or that there is a fault in the application, so
Mhm.
you know that you don't want to pass, and then there will be a group of people because of the timeline. So in the let's say developers or in the management, so they might say, hey, we want to go through it. So there is always a pressure from the both sides.
Yeah, and you're going to have, and we're going to talk a little bit about risk. I mean, there's only certain things that you can do with risk. I mean, you can just accept that risk too. They might look at it and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and accept that risk right now, and we're going to push the software out because the risk of us not launching could have X effect on a client. And this is something that we can push a week later, or we can push a update for, or we can warn users not to put information in XYZ. So when we get to the chapter that talks about risk, that'll help clear that up too for what we can do to mitigate, accept,
Yeah, I knew that was because of the software testing too, like because of the deadline, and then sometimes that happens. Like they can, if there is something really necessary to be fixed, they have to like schedule. I mean, they have to work overtime, or they have to push that time further,
push it out.
depending
Yep.
on, let's say, or something that can fix in the next update. So they will just release that application, like you said. Then later on, they release the update to fix that problem. But like if that is something critical, so they
Awesome, guys. Any other questions?
I have a question, but I'm gonna let people leave them.
Okay. That's